lot of you guys have asked for this. A lot of you guys have messaged about Chris, and we're here. We're finally here, man. If you've been living under a rock and don't know about this amazing guy, he's done sound for Beyonce, Bruno Mars, Lady Gaga, all over the map in terms of music types and diversity. I mean, what haven't you done? I mean, you've done quite a bit, and I just want to say that thank you for sitting here with me. Thank you for talking. And this guy also was one of the very first people who saw something in me when I first started this. You may or may not know, we live pretty close to each other, about, 20 minutes away.
Yeah,
So it's been,
as fate would have it.
We've had some great conversations of sitting on a porch or going to a coffee shop and just talking, but you were one of the very first people that really saw something in this and said, I want to be a part of this. So thank you for speaking that into me, especially at that beginning part of this. Your words at that time were so influential in me and the passion and drive for me to do this. So thank you for doing this. And I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't.
Yeah, thank you for the words. Thank you for recognizing that my words meant something, and they very much. It was a lot at the time to get those words out and to share them with you, but I did. I saw where this was going. I saw you being one of the people that was willing to serve our little niche pocket of the music industry, let alone the world, and a lot of people have ideas of what they want to do, but the people that actually do it are the ones that, deserve the praise or the acknowledgement and all this. And I saw what you were doing early on, and I wasn't in a place where I could do it with you, and I desperately wanted to, but I knew I'm not at all surprised where it's gone too. It was
thank you for all that.
Of course.
And also from the community side too, thank you for what you've done with the Pooch and Rabold show, especially during COVID, man. Mm-hmm. That was a huge shining light, and I still see people tagging you all the time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it comes up in conversation all the time. So thank you for that as well.
It is our, and I can say our. I feel 100% confident speaking for Pooch on that as well. It is our pleasure that we got just as much out of that as everybody else did. And it is funny. It's both funny and a little bit of a trip and a lot of things that was a minute ago now, and the goal was never to stop it, was never to not continue on, whatever, life got lifey, things did what they did, and we're, and I've mentioned it before, we're sitting on a stockpile of not just that content, but real content that we shot now years ago. So I too, whether it's messaging or whatever, to realize that it's been a minute, and we knew what it was like in the moment, and we were both super kind of all but whatever about it, but then quickly like, oh, this kind of matters, again, within our little niche community, it felt really good. And
all that stockpile stuff, do you think it's ever going to see the...
I do now.
Yeah?
I do now.
All right.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for that.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure there's some people will be really excited to see that.
Yeah. I know two of them, and their names are Ken Van Druten and Chris Rabold. We'd be really excited for it to put a lot into it. So yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things I did want to, if you're okay with sharing about it, there was a period where you kind of took a break and took a step back for a little bit. You're back now. And not that you really left, but I think they're...
I left. I hear you. I know what you're saying, but yeah.
Well, you took a pause and took a moment for yourself. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that? You don't have to go into too much detail more than you want to with it. I would love to ask some questions with that, but...
Sure.
Can you explain a little bit through that?
Yeah, I can. And, I'm working, it's, before I took a break, I mean, left in all the ways, pretty much. There was a very long, slow roll, white knuckle series of years, including that time of COVID and prior to that led to that, to where I'm like, how much longer can I go? What does go even mean? There was all these things, and it took, so when it finally got to the point where it was just like, I'm out. And I mean out of everything, not just mixing, you know. I mean, I had to just, and it wasn't with a lot, it was with anything but grace. It was with mud, blood, and everything all over me. By the time I did step aside, it had been a while that I was kind of making my way there. And now I'm still working on how I even portray the story. And because the story is ever evolving, as it is for all of us, including the last thing I want to do is ever claim some enlightenment from on top of the mountain, that I see it all now, and here's why, or where it's all this and that. But nor do I want to continue to give voice to that. It's awful, and look, it's always going to be awful, and I just now I know how to deal with the awful. That's not the message either, you know. So I'm working on the story, on how I give it to you, even right now in real time. I'm beating around it because I'm trying to figure out what's appropriate and what's not. And I was both purposely vague in what I let people know, but also you can kind of read in between the lines to know that there was,
There was some people knew that you and I were talking and were friends. Like a lot of people that reached out and asking, like, is he okay? Is he good? And is everything okay? Because there was definitely a step back and just I don't want to say not communication, but
that
and
eventually.
Then we saw a GoFundMe for it, and then it was like, oh crap, like, is he okay?
Something's
And it
up.
was so cool to see the community kind of come behind that as well. And we don't need to go into a bunch of detail with it. I guess I would ask, do you feel like it was more mental or physical or both?
It was absolutely. That's actually a great question on a number of levels, because I cannot tell you how much it was both. And in the sense that the mind and the body, as cliche and as jargony as that is, that it's all one and that it's all the same. And I deeply suspected all along that what had for a long time been, we'll say, emotional, mental, life struggle, pain, would then morph into something that included a large component of physical element. And it's kind of, early on I suspected their connection. Then I moved away and really compartmentalized everything, but all along said, no, I think these are all kind of the same.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, in the end of that chapter of the story, let's just say the chapter that leads us here to where we are sitting together, it kind of all proved to be the same thing. Now that I will tell you, that GoFundMe that came up, which again, it was part of what was so hard for me, was people did want to know, people do deserve to know, but good Lord, how do I unpack this story with someone in a concise little way that allows them to take for themselves what they even understand, let alone how do you pass it on to others?
Yeah.
So it was hard. I could explain it, but I couldn't pack it into something small to explain to everyone. That eventual thing that came out with the GoFundMe and people being amazing in their help, and that felt like, you talk about the Pooch and Rabold thing, you talk about a career and a lifetime of, this, like, being so grateful for everything I got from everybody else and absolutely wanting to give it back. That felt like a little bit of a payoff. Like there was a little bit of, there was kind of return on investment. I had all the gratitude in the world for people that were willing to give, but I also understood why they might be so inclined to do it. And I'm still overwhelmed by it. I was gigantically ego-stricken at the notion, because that I would need, of it being put out there, but I begrudgingly had to accept it. And it was both awesome and giantly challenging to watch it all come about. And I'm endlessly grateful of the help that came. And I mean, it was literally life-saving, life-changing, whatever words you want to put to it, it was.
I will say, like, you're a totally different person from those months ago. It's so cool to see, like, you've got light in your face now. Your energy is so different. You're got that excitement. It was tough to even kind of watch you through that, because you could tell there was a point of like physical, but that turned into mental, and like It's
It actually
and to
kind of
see
went the
that,
other way. It was a dog chasing its tail, but what you saw of the pain, not to put words in your mouth, but the cat, meaning the catalyst, the genesis
yeah.
was, it was very complex, and I don't know which was a which. But you're right. At least at the time that you met me, compared to what it looks like now, which I will tell you, this is a little bit of a return, but it's actually a total different. It's just so amazing how these things play out.
The interesting thing about this industry, especially the touring industry, is that it encompasses your life and it's part of who you are. Going through that and having to step away from that and go to that place of darkness, of getting to your knees, what was that point, that clicking point to get you back up through that? Because we have a lot of friends in this industry, and we also know it's a tough industry. It can be tough physically, mentally, um, not just that, but even your own personal stuff as well. So for people who are going through that or may feel like they're at the end, and I really want to be always talking about mental health and be able to be an advocate. Then let's be candid about, life is tough, touring is tough. Those compounded can be very tough. But for the people, I hate, and I know we both know people that have decided that couldn't make it through that and decided to not make it. So for the people that are maybe at that point of, I feel like I'm at my breaking point, there's no light. And for someone who's been through that, what's your advice to them, or what got you through to seeing the joy and the happiness and get you to this person that we're seeing here now?
I think the two key points I want to make is, you know, again, our sector my sector specifically of the live music world, which I realize, particularly everyone watching here, it is not necessarily theirs, but mine is the touring, has been the touring. And it was very much the touring that I was into from the jump. My story, while my training involves training in the studio, the goal for me was always live, and including touring, and my eventual difficulties, struggles, both of which are a giant understatement, but those things that I would eventually have in life that would lead me to, or had in life, it would eventually get to a point where I'd had to pull back. They existed long before touring did. So touring, while it is a grind, when you're young, you don't want to hear about that. You don't, like most things, like you hear about the sacrifices, you hear about the toll, blah, 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 but you don't want to hear it because it's so romantic and it's so fun and it's such a badge of honor to do it, but they're real. But those things alone did not lead to my struggles and my eventual having to dip out. If anything, the things that would sort of lead me to having to just stop altogether, this super go-getter, this, my worth revolves around my performance, my I stay up all night, don't sleep, and get it done, and just look at what I do and produce, made me so perfectly suited for the touring world. But it also made me perfectly suited to not be able to sustain that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the point I want to make is, touring didn't do anything to me, but it also didn't help. You know what I mean?
You feel like it amplified?
Yeah, but I, and now I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, well, let's repackage how it all works together.
Yeah.
In other words, I am not for a minute going to be like, oh, I can't do that anymore. I can absolutely do it, but it's a choice on how much I do and how I do it and how I proportion it out. And I don't have to say yes to everything. And while intellectually I always knew I would give lip service to, I'm not my performance, I'm not my resume, I'm not this or that. In a way, I was sort of enacting that. Now I can genuinely say that. Just real quick, the second part of your question.
That's good.
Which was, thank you, the second part of your question was, what advice I can tell you, and you saw firsthand, nothing I was going through looked like anything you would want advice from at the time. It was ugly. It was awful. It was gross. But the one thing I do want to say, if there is a message that I'm currently processing for myself, again, this is not from on top of the mountain. it's going to sound too easy, which is stick around. And it's not because things will change. Yes, stick around, things will change. When I say stick around, I mean that in a very literal sense. I mean stick around. And I completely understand the firm, the deepest of deep beliefs that I cannot stick around. I cannot endure these series of pains, these series of struggles, this overwhelm. What if there was a moment, and there wasn't a moment, there was a series of moments, it was dropping that rhetoric. It was dropping that narrative. It was dropping that it is my destiny, my fate to, to be those things. It's that. It's not was that, it is that and that takes practice. It didn't just change. It's a constant. I have to remind myself because it's too easy to fall back into that very well-worn narrative of this is my fate, I don't deserve, or I do deserve this. That's the closest thing to advice that I would like, or a message that I would impart to the person that right now is sure with everything they know that is their narrative. Because that was mine, So
That's so good, Chris.
I hope so. It
Wow.
feels good. I gotta have goosebumps saying it.
Me too, man. That was.
And also it puts the onus on me to continue to walk it. I knew a lot of this talk, but it wasn't deep enough in me. And there's not enough space on the internet to cover everything that it took to get to the point to really believe it.
That resonates with me so much because I at least before, who I was is what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I took so much value and pride into that job, or to be on touring, or to be, working with this act, and that was my world. And then when I, 14 years ago decided to get sober and leave that industry, when you remove yourself from that, it's
tough.
It is tough, and
there's a lot of identity
what is your
that's gone
exactly
there. Yeah.
When your identity is in that, who are
well,
you?
And I think we all got a real good taste of that during COVID. And again, my kind of slow roll into ultimately having to dip out, again, not just of this industry, but of pretty much of life altogether. Not pretty much, very much. Actually started prior to COVID, but COVID was a good reminder of you were just another person in line at the grocery store with a mask on your face, staying distant. No one cared who you were, what you did, who you worked for, that we all got a little bit of a taste of that.
Yeah.
That you don't, and I'm not for a minute advocating that we not take pride. If anything, I'm speaking more genuinely to it now, that we should and can as a facet of our life, but not as a defining aspect of our life. And again, that mindset did not do me in any way, but it was a contributor to it was a byproduct of a deeper version of that mindset, that my performance and the show of me to everyone and every single, including how I present myself at the grocery store, all of that equaled my worth, as opposed to the whole look, you're pretty all right just because you are,
That's so good.
Thank
you.
I hope so.
For that. No, really.
It feels good.
That speaks to me a lot. There's a lot of things that you talked about that is, I think, so key. But I think I would love to kind of dive into your past a little bit, to what created the person that we're sitting here seeing now. That person that loves that touring life, has that drive for perfection, and that drive to be able to be better and to have excellence, and also to be able to give into the community and being part of that team that we see now. There's so much to that. So first off, where are you from?
Where I'm from. Yeah. And where does a lot of that, speaking of narratives, where does that, there's plenty of narratives I'm choosing to hang on to. And you know what I mean? It's kind of like parsing out.
We all do.
Yeah. Parsing out which ones really, serve us or we want to hang on to. And a lot of my belief in, I mentioned doing things together, and I mentioned being a part of things, that comes from a background early on. My two passions, when you're growing up and you're kind of you're sloppily figuring out who you are. But, it was athletics and music. And the athletic thing, I, I did. There's absolutely a world where you do a lot of things. I've always been very too much so regimented. In fact, I did it with music. You know, to where it just became. I remember I had a great friend of mine at one point in time. We were on the road a long time ago, and I've got like mixed magazines in my bunk and this and that. And he's like, "Man, do you ever turn it off?" You know. And at the time, I was like, "No." You know, now I wish there had been anything else laying. Well, I don't wish. I'm grateful for all of it, but I get his point now. You know, I had a tendency to become very focused. So early on, you know, up through high school, it was athletics was where the real effort was, but the heart was absolutely always in music too, prior to athletics. But I didn't focus on it. I could play a little bit on the guitar. I could bang around on some drums. I could bang around on some keys. You know, I knew some of my favorite songs, but I didn't focus on it, and I just didn't see it as a path. And then my sort of, you know, Al Bundy coulda, woulda, shoulda is I was sure I was going to play college football, and it was this. I had this. I will always tell you that and I've started to change this too, where I'm not really gifted at anything, but I work harder than everybody, and that came from a lot of the messaging I got from sports, you know, and where if you work harder and you're rewarded through that work. And I treated sports that way, and I fully thought I was going to play, you know, college football, not as we sit here in Athens, Georgia. I was not going to play at the University of Georgia, but I was going to play at Georgia. So my version of big time college football, right? And then again, as everybody has their story, you know, I got hurt and I came back, but I wasn't able to perform at the level that I did. And I didn't want to do it less than. And that led me here to Athens, where I had fallen in love with the music scene early on. And I was here for a minute, kind of jumping through some of the same hoops I'd always jumped through in life, with school and this and that. And I just quickly I was, shocker, a deep kid, a deep thinker. And I was like, man, what am I going to do that's going to make me? I mean, I was struggling with these existential topics early on, and I'll never forget it. I was sitting on a little orange 2-seater couch. I remember the day, staring at the hardwood floor, and there was no more athletics, and I needed purpose. And I'm like, what am I going to do in this? What's going to make me? And I made a decision. I said, it's going to be music. I was 18 years old, and I knew I didn't want to write. I knew I didn't really want to play or perform. I had grown to really love live music and going to concerts, and I was always so interested in how it worked. I was vaguely aware of consoles and mixing, and through sports, I was very into not just the playing, but the coaching and leading. And I'm like, I want to put all the pieces together. I want to put it together. I want to manage. I want to work with people. I want to be a part of something. And I sat there in that moment, made a decision that I was going to do live audio. Probably didn't even have those words. I was going to mix concerts. And then 8 gazillion things happen on the other end of that. But when people ask me, how did you get into this? It's a real quick story. I sat on a couch and made a decision. There's a lot that came after that, but there was a moment where I made the decision.
Okay, here's a question. Knowing what you know now, if you were going to send yourself a message, not a text message because it was probably
Yes.
if you were going to write yourself a letter and tell you one thing, that moment you're sitting on the couch, what would you tell yourself?
I wouldn't have heard it. But I get what you're saying. If there was messaging that could have stuck, something along the lines of, this is so cliche, but almost like, don't take yourself so seriously. You're all right.
That's good.
Keep this alive. I mean, I just like a million things I could say, all of which would be, you know what? Don't hyper focus on this. You know, a good way to lose a passion is to hyper focus on it, and then you lose all the fun. You know, which I didn't necessarily lose all the fun in mixing or anything, but the hyper focus kept me from looking elsewhere and being a little more well-rounded. You know. So it'd be
That's so true. These hobbies that like you're passionate about, that turns into a job. Sometimes it turns into work. And
always.
It kind of is...
And it's funny. I have a lot of friends that are, you know, fellow creative types who they too have gravitated towards their passion. And you know, everybody, you know, and you get all this this messaging that is, oh, if you love what you do, you never work another day. And you're like, well, I'm doing that, right? I'm enacting. And then it becomes this burden, this grind. And I mean, I have a lot of friends who are similar, and we're all just like, shit, And so it's just, you're not really willing to make it not a grind until it all but you're forced into going, I can't do this anymore in this grind capacity, And I want it to be a love again. And I want it to be but a facet of a larger life, not the whole of the life.
Yeah.
You know?
One of the things you mentioned was coming to Athens for the music. I don't think people understand the history of music in Athens. What was the bands, and what was the thing that actually drove you to being here?
I mean, I was like, like everybody who has a musical journey where it looks one way when you're young, and it's probably whatever you're exposed to from your parents. And, for me, that was Motown and Neil Diamond and like show tunes. And then I get into pop radio, which at the time was Michael Jackson, Prince, Def Leppard. I mean, again, what a wonderful time to come up, which for me was in the early 80s when these, Mutt Lange and Prince and Quincy Jones and all these people are shaping music. It's also a little confusing because I grew up thinking that's what drums sounded like, as this mass produced, which they do, but there was a lot of polish around it that I'm just like, well, and it drove me when I started mixing. I'm like, why doesn't everything sound like this Lynn drum or this Mutt Lange snare? But anyway, I was into all the pop music and stuff, and then I got into rap. And at each turn musically, I would be like, and this is what I am now. And this is what I am now. But I couldn't fight off that there was all these other influences, and they would eventually fall over top of one another. And there was a period where I got into what at the time was called, like college rock or alternative rock or this or that. And it was a lot of the REM-based stuff, the band REM specifically, the stuff that was coming out of, among all places, Athens, Georgia was like this mecca for it. And I'm 12 years old, my mind is being blown. It felt deep and heavy, and just like, I'm feeling something. I don't even know what he's saying, but I feel this. And then I start learning about the lore of Athens, Georgia, which has always been this kind of hub for indie rock and all this stuff, which I got to be honest with you, my heart's really not in now, but I still hold this place in such high regard.
Yeah.
And anyway, this was always a point on the map for me. And then when college athletics, to the degree I wanted to do it, went off the map, I'm like, well, let's go to Athens. You know what I mean? And let's come here. And there was all of those bands that I was into. Then there was some different music that was coming out of here that was not indie rock that I had kind of gotten into. And it led me here. I've tried to leave. This is home. There have been other places, Nashville is a home too. I've kept a residence there. I feel that is home. I grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky, just north of Nashville. Nashville was the metropolis we went to. I went to school there. Nashville's home too, but Athens is home. I live here, and my daughter lives here. People very special to me live here, and there's just this draw to it. And yeah, it's kind of hard to unpack all of the musical history because it's one of those things like if you know, and if you don't, you're just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
When you started running sound, was there a moment, like when was the moment for you that you kind of knew that, man, I may have something here?
It wasn't for a while. I mean, I can tell you and again, some of this like go-getterism stuff, which again, I am not dropping. I'm just kind of repurposing how it works with me. But I was so committed to the task, both of mixing, and I have kind of told you this story before. I loved the whole aspect of live. I was still very physical in my, at 18 years old, especially being an athlete, and I was a truckloader or a stagehand, all these things. A lot of people now who only experience me as this mixer or see me in this white glove capacity, which, it was a struggle owning that, which I now own. So much of the earned, thank you. And I still feel that now that,
people see that and they think that that's where you started. Like, no, there was.
And also on any given tour, if I'm walking in at 2:00 in the afternoon on show day, that's because I put in the 20-hour days for 6 months prior to that, when such and such wasn't even on the tour to build to a point to do that. Yeah. And but I just want to say with the you're asking what was the moment where I realized I was onto something. I have that answer, but there was so much from I was dedicated to the mixing, I was dedicated to everything audio, but I was also dedicating to how it felt to be on the other end of a case with somebody and realize, oh, I feel what their body's doing and what my body does. And to hit a truck ramp running backwards, I took just as much pride in that as I did the mix. I'll tell you where there was a turning point, and it was many years into it. There was no turning point because I was just in it and on it. But when I was working with Widespread Panic, who is a band out of Athens here, and we would with the advent of big U.S. festivals, and a lot of those festivals were populated by the jam bands at the time, of which Widespread Panic was, for better or worse, part of that scene. And we would find ourselves with bigger acts and on big festivals and big PAs. And that is when I started to notice I'm doing something that really translates, and I would kind of get feedback or looks from artists with other bigger acts or my own peers, and that's when it became, it's like I'm on to something. That was many years into it. That was, if I started in 95, which I did, that was the early 2000s, mid 2000s, where I started to kind of realizing, oh, I'm not just serving this act well, I think I'm serving myself in the industry well, and this might have legs, but I didn't have the opportunity yet to progress. That's the right place at right time aspect of my story that would, but that's when I kind of started to realize, oh, I think I'm on to something here.
Do you think that there's engineers out there that have that special magic, that special something that they could, practice all they want and get good at their craft, but there's just some that just have that God-given gift that cannot be taught? Or do you feel like most of this can just be learned?
I think it's both. I can't tell you how many times in the clubs I would encounter a house person who throughout the day I would hear them dial up another act, or I would watch them work, and I'd be like, they've got it. Like, they're really, and then showtime would roll around, and they would just be drunk, barking in my face, which, don't get me wrong, I have my own history with substances. Boy, do I. And I'd be like, oh, that's what's keeping you from getting out of here. So a lot of people have it, but there are these limiting factors that keep them, or their political, personal skills are such, that's such a big part of it, that they can't navigate around those. I do feel it absolutely, the steps, the fundamentals can be taught, and I'm so big. In fact, I almost overly preach on like having standards and using data and watching your meters, and I preach all those things as a way of standardizing art. And on the days that you're just not feeling well, which is gonna happen, particularly in live sound where there's really no days off, and touring, to be able to fall back on the data and the metering and this and that, but you can't standardize art. Art is an intangible. So you can teach a lot of it, but then there's just that other thing where it's like, I've gone as far as I can with trying to teach you what I need to. Like, you do either have that thing or you don't. But that thing puts people in the upper percentile. The rest of it can be taught and can equal a completely lucrative, profitable, enjoyable career. Just knowing kind of how not to mess up, that can carry you a long way too. But what I do see in the people that kind of have that thing, there's a little something in there. There's a little something different in their personality. And I laugh because it often comes, most of the people that are really great, they're a little extra in some way too. Yeah. And myself included. Like, there's a little extra baggage that often comes with it. They're a little difficult, a little this, a little that. There's something a little that produces that drive. I'll say this and shut up. I have a friend of mine who once said to me, and I know he didn't come up with it, but he said, good art rarely comes from a place of balance. So I'm not advocating go out there and become imbalanced to produce great art, but it seems to kind of come with the great art.
You can see that in so many different areas of, either bands or athletes or
totally. Everybody comes with, even even if you have a good reputation and you have a good this and that, there's somebody that's just like, not that guy. He or she is a nightmare, or phew, they're great, but when they go, or and it's that drive often produces. I don't know. There's often a lot of sides, two different sides to the coin.
What was there a point in, or what was the first point in your career from widespread spread panic on that, or is there a point that you remember like, wow, I can't believe I'm here right now?
I think it was the again at the time I was just really dedicated to them, dedicated to myself, dedicated to that process. I think it was when, again, like I said, when I started to notice that through them I was able to produce something that was, whether it was for the masses or not, it was getting some acclaim, and people, in fact, it was the people who I knew weren't into the music, but were kind of checking out the mix going, good job, kiddo. That's what made me. Now, where it was sort of reaffirmed or a stamp of widespread, no pun intended, approval was put on it was when I did get a call to step outside of, that tenure with them. And it's like I tell people, when the Yankees call, you go. And I was in Athens here, and I was driving around with a friend of mine, and I got a call, and it was the owner of a big sound company, and it was basically like, it was my first of many. Can you get on a plane tomorrow, fly to New York? We had this hugely secretive gig that's of utter importance, but we can't tell you who it is, and all of these things. And I would be and just go ahead and tell you the whole story. It turned out it was an opportunity to go start up a tour for Lady Gaga, fill in, hand off a mix, a lot of things now that I either wouldn't do or I would do for a significantly higher cost. At the time, I recognized the opportunity. I went up there, I did that, completely was, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. Just vibe-wise, energy-wise, everything was so different. And it took me a while to get my feet up there, to learn how to do, I had done track, I'd done a bunch of rap shows, I had done tons of band, I had never married the two, I was forced to do it. But then quickly in time, it worked really well. And that was like, oh boy, there's absolutely something going on here, and it can pay dividends in ways I never thought, on a size and scope I didn't quite think.
You talked about that point where you got the call to the big leagues,
Mm-hmm.
and that's every engineer's dream is that call. And I have some friends that they want that call and they want to get that so bad. So what's your advice to people that want to be able to have that phone call, but be able to answer and give them what they need when that phone call comes? A lot of things in my life, I kind of think of it's the right place, right time, but have the ability to give them what they need at that time. Not saying you need to know everything with it,
Right.
but at least have a general understanding. And there's not like, I need to know it all so I feel comfortable with it. Granted, work outside of your comfort zone with it, but what do you feel like sets you up for success to be able to get that phone call, but also be able to handle that phone? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think probably the more pertinent or useful question for anyone watching is not how do I handle that phone call now, because how I handle that, which is not what you're asking, but how I handle that phone call now is markedly different than how I handled that initial phone call, which is what you're asking. And I've mentioned a lot of steps along the way that, work ethic and commitment and all these whatever, all this stuff that kind of set me up for success. But everybody in every successful endeavor, there is some element of right place, right time. But one way to ensure that you're in a right place at a right time is to be somewhere at any given time, which speaks to like get involved. In other words, that phone call, yeah, I know how that phone call came, and it wasn't only because I was doing these great things with this certain act.
Top of mind.
That I was not solely top of mind. I guarantee you I was one of several, and I happened to answer the phone, and I happened to be proficient on the gear that would be there. They knew I was. Like, there was a lot of things that made me a candidate among many, I'm sure. But what I want to speak to for people is to be in the again to be in the right place at the right time. You need to be in some place. They did not find me because I had been sitting at home waiting for my entitlement of the call. So yes, I'm super fortunate. I've been super fortunate time and time again, as has almost everyone in this profession, in any profession that has some success. But you got to put yourself in the right place at the right time, or put yourself out there to even be at a right place. Now, I'll say this: as far as how do you execute upon that call coming your way, no one's prepared. Well, not true. No one's fully prepared to anything new at any given moment, and there is so much thinking on your feet, fake it till you make it, fear. What is the whole thing? Is it courage or bravery? Is not the absence of fear and taking something on. It's absolutely having the fear but doing it anyway. There's a
Yeah.
lot of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff in it. And that was me at the beginning, and for quite a while longer. And to be honest with you, sometimes I still have that when I'm in these environments where I'm just, I'll still kind of feel like a visitor to a scene, a genre,
Mm-hmm.
especially the highly political. Even though I'm really well adapted at navigating those things now, sometimes I'm just like, "Ew, this isn't me,"
Yeah.
and so I'll still have some of that disbelief that not that I can do it, but maybe I even want to do it, or that I'm of that. And so anyway, but to get there and to produce is just takes bravery and guts and willingness, and it takes a lot, and you're not going to be sure of yourself. And if you are, you need to question that too. In other words, like, you're sure that you're
Yeah.
going to figure it out, but if you're like, I got this, flying the space shuttle today, never seen one, that's not going to work out. You know what I mean? Like, you need to have a little bit of healthy fear to keep you motivated and to keep you grounded. So.
Okay. If you could erase one event from your mind and relive that event for the first time
Mm,
again,
mm.
what would that event be?
To be honest, this is where I have a spoil of riches in my life, is that it's so many things come to mind that I have forgotten all the great moments that I've had in live audio, which is good to hear me say and think of, particularly with some of the other stuff we've talked about. There is one thing that I remember Pooch and I one time were kind of talking about these big moments that we did. I mean, we did like a Pooch and Rabold where we talked about it. And I think I mentioned it then, and it does stand out to me now, where it was not that first tenure with Lady Gaga. I went from the Lady Gaga's, from there sprung forth a bazillion different things, but the second one was Beyonce, and then went back to Lady Gaga, and then then the rocket ship took off. But it was around 2012 with Lady Gaga in Paris at the Stade de France, and
Hmm.
it was this like synth intro to Poker Face. This massively smash beyond smash hit of hers, which again, that's not even my genre of choice, music of choice, but I know good when I see good. I know effective when I see effective. And it sounded so good in that stadium. I'll say it, and it's hard for me to say that. It sounded so good. And the way that song starts with this, and then everyone's anticipating the drop. And then when the drop hits, I have goosebumps again, second time in this interview, but I have goosebumps now thinking about what that felt like, anticipating that drop, knowing what the drop. That was such a pinch me moment. I had another similar one that comes to mind on the larger scale things, that was it was in the U.S., and it was at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena with Kenny Chesney, where I'm just like, again, with my athletic background, I'm like, oh my God, I'm at the Rose Bowl, and it sounded great, and there's a gazillion people, but it's that Lady Gaga, it's that one, that moment, waiting for the drop, let alone the drop. The drop was probably so powerful, like I kind of can't remember it, but I was just waiting for the and the swell of energy that happened. Um, Oof, that was one I wish I could do again and again.
What band did you work for that you feel was probably the hardest one to get dialed in, but after it, you have a whole new appreciation because of how it stretched you as an
Bruno.
engineer?
Yeah, that's not a hard one. Beyond all of the big, I mean, honestly, I this is not me just saying it. Every act, everything I approached with, importance and intensity, probably too much so. Um, but Bruno himself and his approach, um, and very much a kindred spirit with him. Like I understand the all but maniacal approach and just stretching yourself and everyone around you to their maximum capacity and then pushing a little further again, sometimes for better or worse. But he has pushed me over the years on and off working together. um, and I have a partner in that too. My best friend, one of my very best friends, Charles Moniz, who is his studio engineer. Who, because we again doing when you do something together, that creates a wholly unique bond, and that's where live audio is great. That's where touring is so special. Um, but both working with Bruno and then Charles, both because he's not Bruno. He's very much a me, but he's an extension of Bruno. Like the way that thing worked, where everybody's pushing everybody, that made me such a. I had a good game going, and it got all shook up when I got there, and it took a minute to get some results. And but that one, without a shadow of a doubt.
I am such a huge fan of Bruno and his shows because, I mean, I feel like it takes the next step up to where even the musicians are dancing choreographed, and the amount of thought you can tell that goes into it is not just haphazardly, let's get up there and do it. It's very well thought out, and it is. And I've noticed that there's there's been a lot of people I've worked for and a lot of bands I've worked for, but there is something with, I feel like, the greats, and especially some of the old timers, that where they had to, how do you captivate an entire audience by yourself? Take away the pyro, take away the LED wall, take away everything, and the art form of you. I remember I was working with Gladys Knight one time. I think it was like a one-off for it, and seeing her captivate an
There you go.
entire audience by just her.
Yeah.
So I guess my question, with the bands that you've worked with, what do you feel like separates the goods from the greats?
I mean, you essentially nailed it. Where, and it's almost too easy of an answer, but it's cliche. Cliches are often cliches for a reason. They have it, and while they might not have a super clear always, they might not always have a super clear cut roadmap to how they're going to convey it. Like one of the reasons that I relate so heavily to Bruno is, yes, the end result is always impressive, purposeful. You see everything that you see for a reason, but the process is often sloppy and a little frantic and manic, but also it's beautifully relatable and real in that it's not a. It's kind of like the steps along the
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
But what they all have, the greats at any given level, um, meaning there's great that appeals to this number of people. There's greats that appeal to this number of people. When we talk about a Bruno or Beyonce or somebody like that, we're talking about this number of people. They have a vision. They don't stop until that vision is achieved. They kind of either know when to say when or just relent at a certain point. Like arguably the vision for them is never fully achieved.
yeah.
Which again, I want to be very careful to advocate for that never be satisfied, because that will leave you longing and never fulfilled. But they have a vision. They can put themselves, no matter how far removed they are from being that audience member, they had some sort of emotional connection. And now that I say that, I'm thinking about Bruno as a fan, Beyonce as a fan. Again, the only, well, we've kind of skipped over some Nashville stuff, which is it's fine. But I was in Athens, then I went to Nashville to
Okay.
really cut my teeth. And yes, in Nashville, I worked, spot gigs for a lot of country, but I've only ever had one kind of long-standing country gig, and that was with Kenny Chesney. But I quickly noticed with him that he had it, and in talking to him, I realized what a fan he was. So all of these people were huge fans, so they can put themselves in that space, and I think that's what
Not
makes
fans of themselves, fans of the art form, correct?
fans of the art form. Oh yeah, no, yeah, exactly. They are, not were, are huge music fans, and therefore they can. It's almost like not. It is wholly their vision, but partly what is the vision that the person sees, and that's what they can do, and that's how they're able to craft such a purposeful and effective performance, message, show, what have you. You know, they're fans. They're huge fans. They do know what they know what they would want as a fan. You know.
Is there any artist you would love to mix for, you'd pay to mix for?
Yeah, it's funny. Some of the ones that I will say that for, the mix would be done in about 5 minutes, and that is sort of the AC/DC Rage Against the Machine. You know, the kind of either two guitar, bass, and drums, or guitar, bass, drum. You know, some of that stuff, but where the energy is so heavy. You know, and that of course speaks to my to the rock background, and very much the upbringing that I have. Maybe, and I had, after a while with Prince, it wasn't even, there's people who mix Prince like Cubby back in the day. Robert Scoville had his time there when Prince was at that point where it was a badge of honor. It was a huge thing. Then after a while, it just became this revolving door of abuse. And I would have never wanted anything to do that. I had that opportunity and I was like, no thanks. But to be around, to be able to, without the handcuffs that seemingly went with that gig over time, Prince would be another one. If I could safely work that and do what I wanted to, that would be one that I would love to have had a crack at.
So you've kind of expanded a little bit beyond just doing front of house. With the years of experience, you've got some great knowledge behind what you do. Recently, I know you were consulting for Beyonce, and literally Beyonce is asking you to come in and do a consultation. There's already a team in place there, but you're also being asked to come in and give advice and consult to the artist. What is your mindset going into that and consulting for that with a team in place? What do you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, and it looks different every time I do it. Of course, when a phone call like that comes your way, which is becoming more and more of a thing in our industry, and I'm happy to be. I'm proud. Again, talk about have the pride. I'm proud to be at sort of the forefront of that becoming more of a thing. But you figure out where all the body. You get as much knowledge as you can ahead of time to where the bodies are buried. What's the look? Is there a concern that has me there, or is there just a need and a want to have me on? There might be any number of things. And with her specifically, I've done it in any number of ways where there was a perceived problem, whereas most recently, there was absolutely no problem. You've been a part. I want you there. So you go in, and part of it is let me access everything I can figure out, like who's involved, what's the current feel, and then you have to allow for some time, which, as you know, time is money, and everybody wants you to come in. And, well, no, not everybody. There's often the feel that you're supposed to come in and strong arm something or sprinkle immediate fairy dust everywhere and make this huge change. You have to get there and let it all kind of land.
Expecting like bar rescue for you to come in and tear it all apart and rebuild
particularly
it.
When they're saying, hey, please come, but there's no rescue involved. And what there is this real, I think there can be a draw or a yearning on people's parts to get there and show your worth real quickly, to make big sweeping changes, when in fact the calmest flex and show of strength that you can have is to come in and just kind of sit with it for a minute. And it's hard to not want to either get hands-on or give a million notes or let whoever has made the phone call see that you're doing a lot, to just really let it land and let it take shape as to what level of involvement do I have. And that level of involvement, it's not unlike in mastering, where the greatest mastering engineers, well, there's a couple different versions of what a great mastering engineer can look like. Either they take a recorded and mixed project and just salvage it from the depths to palatable, nice form. But the really, 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 really good ones know when to take it and go, the best thing I could do right now is nothing. You know, like the best thing I might be able to do, because there was a strong team in place, is to go, good job, everybody. I'm going to put the IDs on this song and here's your product back. I did nothing. And again, in their case, there's a strong pull to do your secret moves and have this great impact, when in fact, the greatest thing you might be able to do is just go, this is really good, and I sign off on this. So it looks different every single time. It is hard to not go in and want to get hands-on, or to be okay with not, or to, it's also hard to have a vision and short of you doing it, being okay with what it is. That takes a lot of restraint. That's something I'm still learning now, is when to go, you know what, that is more than good enough. In fact, that's great. Is it exactly what I would have done? No. And in some cases, it might be better than what I could have done. And I need to realize that too.
I think that'd be tough for me, especially if I saw somebody else coming in as a consultant. I would think of you as the enemy.
Well, yes, and that's always in the room. And that's always in the room. And to say it's not, I try not, sorry, I'm going to jump on that.
No, you're great. You're not the enemy, though.
I'm not, but it is no, okay, I'll tell you this. The other creative types that I work with, largely engineers, but in this path, particularly when you get on a project of that size where I'm dealing with, you know, sort of in my world are these, yes, of course it's audio people, but then maybe some of the people that I'm traveling or around, they're video people or wardrobe people or makeup people or blah, 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 blah. They're all taking constant notes. Not taking note, meaning being given critical feedback. And yes, everybody has feelings and everybody has ego and emotion, but to watch those people take countless notes of anywhere from this isn't good enough to just we can do this better, and to watch them take those notes with confidence and assuredness, that helps me go, okay, no, the truly most confident of confident, best of the best, don't take offense to the notes. Don't get too hurt about it. And that makes me go, you know what, I'm not the enemy. And I take notes, and I hope you can take notes too. But so I don't try to get ahead of that vibe and talk it to death, where I'm like, hey, let's all admit it, this is kind of weird, right? Me being here, this is weird, it's super weird. But I'm not going to talk around it. You know, I'm not going to talk around it either. And there are times too when I wish I could approach something and there not be feelings there. Sometimes there's just going to be feelings there. And I don't always navigate that internally the best, but I do know, look, we're all there for a reason, including myself in whatever that given role is. And we all have a right and a role. And ultimately we are serving a client. You know what I mean? So what are their wishes? What are their needs? Not what is this maybe contentious relationship in the moment. And more times than not, that weirdness, that contentiousness, if it's there, can quickly be diffused and become anything from workable and understood to really great. And then it becomes collaboration. And that's when we really start producing. You know what I mean? Is when it truly becomes collaborative and everybody's like, oh, yeah, we're in this together. We're going to do this together. So, but it's a thing. It's interesting dance. It's a new dance, both for me and for the industry. But I mean, it's pretty cool. I'm grateful to have the opportunity
doing more of
to
it?
do it. Ideally, hopefully, probably. I mean, trust me, there's not a world where I don't just go in and mix on my own without the consultation or without any, I'm used to the consultation. I'm used to music directors, producers, artists, engineers. That's part of what makes me well suited to do it, is I've been taking that for years. And I know how to do it, and I know not to take offense to it. If anything, look to that person for sort of guidance, know that their word matters, know that it's not a personal attack. If it is a personal attack, then that's a personal problem. You know what I mean? So if anything, it's yet another area where I'm kind of uniquely suited to do it, because I've been doing it for years. I've been taking the notes, meaning I have been given the notes, and now I just happen to be in a place where, yes, I'm now giving them, but you better believe there's someone upstream of me giving them to me. It's a whole food chain, you know?
I want to shift into talking about products
Yeah.
and equipment stuff. But first off, I want to thank you guys for your support. I can't do this if it wasn't for you guys' support. We've got Patreon, we've got YouTube. There are paid subscriptions for it. That helps literally put this on. We've got a website, thisisdellarcruz.com. We've got groups on there. If you want to ask a pro there, or people like Chris that are verified, legit, no keyboard warriors. There's job postings and all that kind of stuff in there. Please go to the website, or if you want to get some merch, that goes directly to help support this kind of stuff. So please go there and support. So in terms of products and equipment, my first question is, was there a piece of equipment that revolutionized the way you mixed, or when you saw that was like, oh wow, this is the future, other than virtual playback? What's been the first thing in your career you're like, oh my gosh, that was life-changing? And then with that, where do you think is the...
And I'm glad you said that with, the whole, with playback, because that truly is the most transformative thing in my and many people's careers. But you're saying, like, going back, what was something that
Yeah,
just
was there a
changed
point you saw within the industry and where it was headed that this was the key point to where all of a sudden the industry did this? And I get digital consoles are like that, but what...
They are. To me, where I saw the industry really take a hard turn, and with resistance as well as acceptance, was the advent of line arrays. Which I know now, it's like, what do you mean the advent? But
from point source to line array.
That was really significant, and it was clear that it was like the train had left the station. It was clear why some people didn't like it. I mean, there was a lot.
Why was the big pushback?
I think, well, first of all, change for one thing, and I'll say some of it too was absolutely warranted in that, one of the things that line arrays that they brought us was, fixed width. And going into certain, acoustic spaces where, like, yes, the technology was such an advance, the way that it put audio forth and extended it into the far field and provided consistency throughout the field. All of the things that it was purported to do, it did and does with a line array. But one thing, where we would have, at most, you would have 90 degrees everywhere, maybe then at the bottom an option of 120. But, you're in a theater or a small room, and with the scalable rigs, which, yes, they had comb filtering everywhere, but you could kind of stay off that wall. Then you got into these places where it's like, here's the pattern, this is the pattern, and nothing but the pattern. It's like, but that pattern actually doesn't work in here. Like, I'm splattering far more on that wall than I would prefer to. So those arguments or counterpoints to the validity of line arrays were warranted. They were valid. That's the one that, to me, comes to mind most readily of why it wasn't the right choice for all applications. And then other people, though, just they don't want change because they don't want change. They don't want to have to learn anything new. Even if what you had was imperfect and lacking, it's what you know, and you don't want to change. So, for me, yeah, watching line arrays come in and watching their immediate impact and watching the pushback, that to me was the most pivotal thing that have been a part of, and that happened fairly early on in my career. I mean, they showed up in the 90s. Of course, I didn't. I was mixing on trap systems like everybody else. But when VDOS came around, I was absolutely, the internet was young back then, but I was downloading white papers. The propaganda, the scientific papers off the internet, and I knew that's where it was going. And then I would hear it, and I would hear less than stellar versions of it, then I'd hear incredibly stellar versions. Then I too had the opportunity to tour with it, and I found where it was the great solution, and then a lot of times it actually wasn't, because largely, to me at least, of that fixed pattern. That caused problems in a lot of places, and still does.
In my career, this has been the first time that I have seen the pendulum go one side and then kind of going back to the other. For me, it's the first time, because when I started, it was analog, and now I've seen the pendulum go to digital, and I've seen it now kind of come come back.
Mm-hmm.
What's your advice to younger engineers that want to get into either plugins or outboard gear? Because I kind of equate it to I want to go fishing, and now you're at Bass Pro, you're looking at all the lures, the lines, and everything. So if you could kind of get rid of some of the noise for a little bit and say, hey, focus on effects or
Mm-hmm.
outboard, or it doesn't need to be specific equipment, but what would you say is like, hey, focus on this and then expand from there?
If there was a tool, a type of tool that I would encourage people to look into, and I would encourage this as a tool because it's kind of a multi-tool. It does a lot of things, is particularly as we are in the era of well into the era of digital audio, which yes is largely cold and sterile and vibeless because there's not all the circuitry on the front end. There's not all the transformers and the tubes and just the iron and the rolled off frequency responses and the limited dynamic range. What's something I would look into, if you want to look into a tool, look into saturation or distortion devices, whether that's a plug-in, whether that's the built-in thing on the console, its emulation of it, again, plug-in, hardware, whatever. Look into distortion and saturation, because what those do is they do any number of things, but largely they will affect tone. So there's your EQ. They will affect vibe and energy. So think exciter, and also an intangible. When I say vibe and energy, where you can't quite necessarily put your finger on it, they will greatly affect, those types of things will greatly affect dynamic range. They will cut off transients. They will raise RMS. They will shape the sound in a way that you're, particularly if you are a younger mixer, you might not be used to hearing anyway. And it's largely a sound too in the past that we're kind of wanted to get away from. So not a lot of people wanted to get away from the grit and the grind and the distortion. What we found as we move away from it is it's sterile and lifeless and a little limp. And so look into the various forms. From the extreme, it is distortion. At its very simplest, it is harmonics. Somewhere in the middle is saturation. I would encourage people to really look into, learn the sounds, the various flavors, but understand the why of it too. Why is it making it sound this way? And it's doing it because of everything I said. It's the limiting of the dynamic range. It's the additional harmonics that create excitement. But learn what that is. Look into that. I think you'll get a lot out of that. And mixes inevitably sound better when there's more harmonic excitement involved in them. So that's a tool I would encourage people to look into.
You don't have to answer this if you don't want, but
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like there's anything that is kind of a gimmick, or you're kind of sick of seeing this, like, let's stop focusing on this?
Uh, yeah, there's some low-hanging fruit there that I won't necessarily go after in terms of, just
Yeah.
because you did say gimmick. Um, because it's some of the things that have a gimmick to it have a lot of usefulness space around it too. And if anything, it's a shame because it's just too easy to pick on the gimmick. One of the things I'm not, it's crazy. I just mentioned earlier talking about the rise of line arrays and how it extended clarity and reproduction into the far field, and that's done, yes, by the coupling, the uniform presentation of the frequencies throughout the frequency spectrum, but it's from extending the HF into the far field. What I don't like is the hyping, the overnatural hyping of either end of the spectrum. So meaning either way too much sub or way too much top end. Like, yes, it is great. I do want the high end to throw, but I don't want it to throw unnaturally in a garish way that's just doesn't sound musical. You know what I mean? So that to me is something I don't like, is the kind of the gimmicky, processed, overhyped sounding, specifically of the HF, that I hear in a lot of PAs. I also don't have the solution per se. I don't exactly know how to make it softer and better. I know what companies I think do it softer and better, more musical. But yeah, it's the overhyping of the HF that bugs me.
Is there any equipment that you're excited about? or something you've been working with that you're?
Yeah, for sure. There's, I had been a big proponent for a long time of welcoming plug-in servers that could handle any number of not just manufacturer-specific servers. And it's here now, and it's been here for more than a minute with all the VST servers. So I love that. It opens us back up to, again, not just, and I'm super grateful to, Waves specifically, and what they're the only manufacturer out there that has consistently given us the time of day. You know, say what you want about Waves and their products, or say all that you want about, glowingly. They have consistently, from the jump, been the only people to give us the time of day, consistently, and that consistency is just so appreciated. But extending outside of the limited scope of what a manufacturer offers puts us on par at a place similar to our studio counterparts or our bedroom warrior counterparts who can use whatever they want. So all the VST servers, Waves has wisely worked that into their server, the ability to use the VSTs. What Fourier is doing is great. I use Live Professor, for a period of time, kind of kicking the tires on what it would be like. All of that stuff excites me. So there's an endless number of plugins out there that I'm just constantly, it's almost hard to keep. Talk about keeping up with the Joneses, being at Bass Pro Shop looking at all the lures. It's almost overwhelming to kind of reel it in. You know what I mean? If anything, it's almost overwhelming the number of options that are out there in plugin world. But what a great problem to have. What a great problem to have. You know what I mean? With regards to that, there's other there's innovation I see out there that's really cool. I don't know that I will ever use it on a tour per se. I do have plans to go toy with it. I'm really interested. There's this company Stage Tech that has this console, the Athens, that I find super fascinating. In that, I talk about, man, I miss all the circuitry, I miss the transformers, I miss the girth, the grit, the grind, and all these things that made a cool sound that was inherent in analog that's missing in analog. But what this company's done, from what I understand, with Stage Tech and the Athens, which is a console, is they've kind of said, you know what, we're obviously still going to process audio through the conversion to digital to audio, or excuse me, audio analog to digital process that has to happen, the AD process that has to happen, but we're going to do it in a unique way. But what we're going to do is we're going to skip the part where we have this kind of weak little wimpy preamp on the front end. And it's hard to make a big beefy preamp when you got to fit 60 of them into something this big. Like, I don't scoff at what the manufacturers, at the challenge they have at putting a product with tone and real sound into this little area. And I'm grateful that they can put as much as them. Talking about, stage cages. Athens has done this thing where they're like, all right, we're going to bring the audio in, we're going to wittily convert it in a really unique way. Couldn't even try to describe the math, but it's been described to me. But then what we're going to do is we're going to take the signal as it's then made into the digital realm, and we're just going to amplify it in a synthesized way. So what I mean by that is it's akin to, like you would say, clip gain in Pro Tools or digital gain on a console. In other words, it's not a kind of half-ass way of doing analog gain. It's absolutely synthesizing it into something larger and something usable. And in doing that, I just find it really fascinating that they've kind of said, oh, okay, let's just skip the pomp and circumstance of doing a less than preamp. We're just going to synthesize it to bring it up to a usable level so you can mix. And what is seemingly the most fascinating part of it, people that have used it say it doesn't create this super ones and zero, incredibly polished, transparent sound. It actually has a vibe to it. So I appreciate them skipping over a process that doesn't get done really well, which is often the preamp circuitry in a digital console. I appreciate the uniqueness of approach, the honesty, and then what I'm really intrigued by is it seems to have a sound that comes with it. So there's a lot, again, I may never even I'll demo it, I may never even use that product, but I'm just so encouraged by that kind of approach,
It seems like there's a trajectory in some of these engineers that I've interviewed, especially at the top tier level of you kind of reach the top of your career, do some consulting stuff, but also the desire to want to work at the manufacturer and kind of make something unique your own. Is there a desire for that? Is there a manufacturer you would love to work with and kind of put your little flavor on something?
I don't know that I would. There's not like, if anything, I want to not be pigeonholed by, one of the things that's great about our industry, so great, is making relationships, but then you feel kind of beholden to use that and only that. I want it to continue to open up, you know, I want it to continue to open up where there's just so many products where, again, the problem is now making a choice because there's so much available to us. I think that's really cool.
In terms of products and the future, is there a hole that you see in the industry that you think needs filling, or what do you think is the future of?
I'll tell you, I used to say this strongly about let us have access to all of these plugins. Let us have access to all the plugins, which ironically, with TDM, when DigiDesign came out, and TDM was the closest we really got to it, where there was just so much available. And sometimes the installers wouldn't necessarily work with DigiDesign, but if you kind of kicked and screamed a little bit, you could get all these. So we sort of had it for a minute. Then we went to just industry specific plugin servers. Then it got kind of narrowed, and that's when I was sort of like, please let us use everything. And then over time, that became normalized. Now that's a thing. Something that I don't have to advocate for because it's happening, that I'm highly encouraged by, is we're getting back with all of the Dante-based preamps that are out there. What they are addressing is, it's not just the Dante compatibility. It depends on what your perspective is. If you're just super IT minded, you love the Dante-ness of it all. I could give a shit about the Dante-ness of it all. I like what those preamps are doing, in that they're saying, hey, let's make a greater source sound. And a lot of that circuitry that I'm saying we're missing is now being reincorporated. You know what I mean? Where there's transformers back in these things. There's sound, there's grit, there's character. So the fact that the industry is looking at improving source sound means there's less need for all the tools and all the, anywhere from tools to gimmicks on the other end to doll it up, because we're addressing it, making it loud and proud and something special on the front end, which means now those are all just problems of privilege, where you can use the tools and the gimmicks if you want, but you don't need to. There was a time here very recently where I will say, and I too was annoyed at everybody using 800 plugins and this and that, but because the source sounds just weren't that awesome through a lot of digital desks, you kind of did have to do, you sort of had to do more to it to make it work. Now we're getting back to making the source sound great through a lot of those Dante based, or whatever the networking is, those external preamps are addressing that and getting back to working with, source sound. So that's not a need that I spoke to. I mean, I had it in mind. I was always thinking about it. I had used external preamps with converters and all this other stuff, and it's like, God, we're just jumping through so many hoops just to make this thing sound good. Again, now kind of getting back to source sound is the importance. And as long as I've been a proponent of what they, now people will call like hybrid mixing, where you've got the digital desk and all the analog gear. I've been doing that ever since, and I've loved it. Now, if I can get a stronger sound at the source, you're going to see me go far more in the box. Far, far, far more in the box, because I won't feel the need to incorporate some of the analog to grit it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think probably a lot of people's questions right now is what's next? What's next for Chris? I know you did this stuff with Beyonce, and I know you've got a buttload of footage that hopefully we get to see, and hopefully soon. And I'm sure there's a lot of options for you right now, especially that the word's getting out a little bit. Can you give us a sneak peek into maybe your direction that you kind of want to go with it as you're seeing these options kind of come in, the phones start ringing a bit more?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see your trajectory kind of going with this, and where would you like to kind of push it?
I'll
towards?
say this. I haven't been, it's kind of like be careful what you wish for, where once you've had some privilege and some success, that phone just won't stop ringing. Which, again, I'm sure there are people out there that want to jump through the screen and choke me hearing that. But So it's, I'm stepping purposely with to what level I want the phone to ring, with what projects I want to take. I have a plan on what I'd like to see happen in the future for myself. What's gonna happen is some version of that plan. You know, of course I'm mixing. I will always be mixing. That's my creative outlet. That's my joy. It's my passion. It's what I'm good at. The earning capacity is there. All the things. I'll keep mixing. I do enjoy the consulting. I enjoy the seat at the creative table on tours, like we haven't really had in audio in the past, where we have we're not just there in this service mode of like yes, no type only people, where we have a voice on what the creative shaping of the show is. That's kind of few and far between where there's the ability to do that, but I want to do more of that. For sure, do I want to continue down the content road?
Just going to ask that. Can we see more of you online and
Yeah,
more
yeah,
of
I
this kind
enjoy
of
that.
stuff?
I enjoy that. I mean,
Yeah.
I know all the pitfalls of it as well, but I do enjoy. I like talking. I enjoy giving back. I enjoy not holding back. You know, at the end of the day, I can tell you all the things to do, but you still got to do it. And at the same time, I can try to cop someone else's way, and it just doesn't work for me. You know, but I like doing this. I like talking. I like teaching. I like whatever it might be. So there's more of that. There's a lot more of that. There's a couple other hustles in the industry that I've proposed to people and that have been approached or proposed to me that I'm interested in, that they're absolutely all audio based, but they're a little more maybe administrative, political, more along the lines of the consulting type thing, but a little different. So it's what I'm speaking to, if you hear it, is a lot of sort of project based stuff. What I don't want to do, and there is a time to do this, and there is absolutely money to be made. I'm not saying don't. What I don't want to do anymore is lock in on just, although my wallet might feel differently from time to time, is to just lock in on a multi-year tour for 11 months out of the year, have no life outside of that, just make I'm convinced you can make the money and be diversified and be more whole and full, or at least that's my sincere goal. You know what I mean? And again, not to diss any of that. I wouldn't have these opportunities that I have now to diversify and be choosy had I not have put in the time on those 10, 11 month out of the year plugs.
Yeah.
And prior to that, pushing the boxes and slamming the trucks full of gear and I mean, it's all been step by step by step, and everything's been built upon what came before.
I feel very blessed with this channel and what it's turned into unexpectedly that you saw beforehand. But one of the things I've been amazed by is the amount of people from different cultures, different countries, from Uganda to Canada to Australia, and I try to, and I know as you do, as much as we can, give back to the community and be able to educate and help and give understanding with it. And some of these interviews, and I'm sure that people see this and go, hear the answer of what's your advice people want to get in the industry is network. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's these buzzwords that we'll say with it. And I know there's people that watch this wondering, what the heck does that mean? Go to the place, be at the thing. We talked about going to the place, be at the thing, which is great. But what do you see as areas that are specifically within networking and being in that right spot? What are some do's and don't do's with that? And what's your advice to the people that are watching this sitting at home saying, I want to do it, but I'm not really sure where? Do I just Google some venue? Do I Google Chris's house and sit out there and knock on his door? Because there's a fine line too of bugging people too much and being a pest, but there's also, you have to go out there and do that. So for you, based upon your experience, what does that mean to network and to be at that place? What is that place?
I'm glad you said based on your experience, because one thing I like to do is note in this giving back process, which, the giving back is not just this holy righteous thing. I get a lot of I get so much from giving back, including absolutely some validation, praise, and some of the things that I'm like careful not to take too much of, but I do. I get a lot out of it, and it feels good to give back. But what I am able to give, I like to make a point, sometimes too much so, that it is only my experience that X, Y, and Z, which what that says is this is what I did. I'm not telling you this is what you need to do. So for me, there's two things. The two biggest things I've never changed my tune on is read everything you can, which now means also watch everything you can. At the time, it was largely print media. The beginning of the internet, you couldn't stream or what, but take in, learn as much as you can, and get involved. What you might find out is you're either not good at um, the networking, the people stuff, or you just don't enjoy it. Now, I also might push back a little on that and go, you're better than you think you are. Cut yourself some slack. Learn how to do it. But what you might learn is that your version. I don't expect anyone to walk in and be some kind of finger gun wheeler. Like, that's gross. That doesn't come across as genuine, but some people can do that and it works really well for them. And there's a lot of people in this industry who that's all they can do is network. Like, their mixing skills aren't that great. There's more than a few of those. So know what your strengths are and aren't. Know what you can work on, what you want to, or maybe what you don't want to. But my experience has largely been, it has been relationships and putting yourself out there, making yourself visible, finding the fine line between being too much of a pick me, and yet make eye contact. Let them know you're there early on. You know what I mean? Or just be available, answer the phone, do the things. So what networking is to one person is largely different to another one. I will just say that, again, they're not going to find you because they're looking under rocks. Like, you have to be noticeable and notable, or just available. That's important to mention too. Perhaps just available is enough to get you your big break. You don't have to be excellent to get the big break. I'm glad we just talked that through. Be available. You know what I mean? Be
Yeah.
out there to some extent. Doesn't mean 24/7, 365, but be available. The entitlement of society and culture as a whole is really made evident in our business, that people a lot of times now just think the phone should ring for them based purely on their existence. And it's like, no, there's everything from your literal availability very much to your merit, what you bring to the table. It all matters. Bring it all, and be prepared to bring it all. It's just not gonna come find you.
What's the most common question that you get asked? I've seen you've been posting stuff on Instagram and people ask you questions. What's the most common question that people have asked you?
Yeah, and that's been a fun little thing too. Is like part of like kind of the slow roll reemergence back into things. Is I don't always want to answer my text or DMs per se, but I recognize in that I'm like, I tell you what the exercise in that is I am so apt to talk and 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 talk, is to try to make short answers.
Yeah.
That's what the exercise is there, and it doesn't just help me in live audio; it helps me in life, because I will overtalk everything. The biggest question I get asked, which is one that we've covered, is how'd you get started in this? And I go back to, I made a decision. That does not mean that there weren't a million things that happened afterwards, like I said, but I made a decision. So that's real important too. Even just a minute ago, you're like, what do you think it looks like? It's like, well, I've made a decision for it to look one way. I know good and well it's going to go through the blender of life and circumstance and go another, but that decision helps shape, form, and focus what it looks like going forward. So just make decisions, and also be willing to pivot, because it's going to change. Whatever it is going to change. You know what I mean? But yeah, have a set of beliefs and a set of goals and a greater overarching want for what it is that you're going for.
If people want to follow you and follow your career, where can they follow you at?
I don't have a ton of stuff to plug other than, you can find me on Instagram at Chris_Rabold. You can certainly find the Pooch and Rabold stuff. You can simply just Google my name and put whatever you put, audio, front of house, any of the things, and you can find old media stuff that's a little bit newer, this and that. I hope, and this is a good chance to plug it while it's not fully formed yet, Pooch and I have something called Live Mix Presents that we formed and made some content for years ago that's finally going to see the light of day. You'll find like an Instagram account that has nothing on it now, but just remember that. Remember Live Mix Presents, because again, the plan is for that to see the light of day, and we are really, really proud of what we did there. So those are the ways you'll find me, you'll see me. Again, you've thanked me, I thank you. I thank you for this platform. I thank you for doing it, and I'm happy and honored to literally be in the spot to be able to sit here and do this with you.
Man, I appreciate that. Thank you for all of this, man.
Yeah.
Really. We did it.